What's going on, Wellness Gang? Welcome back to Embodied Wellness Radio, a podcast framed around making women healthy again. And today we have a very special guest who we've had on the podcast before, and you guys loved her. I'm here back talking with my good friend Maddie about home births, and I'm so excited to have her on. Thank you so much, Madison, for coming on our podcast.
Thanks, Sarah.
So,
Happy to be here.
I know Madison, but if you have not listened to our podcast with her previously or you're not familiar with her services, Madison is a womb healer and highly renowned birth doula in the Lower Mainland area of BC, where I live as well. She created Ode to Birth, which is a community that assists many women on their journey from maiden to mother. For many years, she's been facilitating life-changing events, women's circles, the Red Tent Mystery Circle, the Red Tent Mystery School, along with village gatherings for those seeking alternative birth experiences, and one-to-one womb healing sessions in her hometown of Port Moody, BC. She trusts that all women can birth ideas, projects, and the future generation of children in full sovereignty. It is her dharma to continue to be a lighthouse for anyone who reaches out to her for support, and we are so lucky to have her here to chat with all of you on home birth and go through some of the myths and common misconceptions with giving birth at home. So again, thank you so much, Madison, for being here today. So why don't you let the people know just a little bit about your experience in the home birth space? So with assisting people at home birth, how you have seen that to be a lot different than hospital births. And for somebody who's actually in the trenches working with women through a birthing process, for you, what is the experience like in home births versus a hospital birth?
Well, thank you. I love the visual of being in the trenches, just like with my arm around my ammunition already. This work is incredible, and I have seen a huge shift within birth culture, especially in the last 9 years that I've been holding space for birth and for my clients. What I've witnessed is physiological home birth is essentially optimal for the mother and the baby. And I'm sure we're going to dive into why. And that's from my personal experience. This is what I've learned is that birthing at home in the comfort of your home, surrounded by people that you love and trust, is optimal for the mother and for the baby versus being in a medical setting, if not necessary.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you let people know what a birth doula is? Because I know a lot of people are familiar with midwives or OBGYNs in the birthing space. And I think there's a lot of lack of knowledge in what a birth doula is and how they can assist people on the birthing process, as opposed to, most people probably are connected with an OB, and how your experience as a birth doula really assists somebody through the birthing process.
Right. So the definition of a doula is a woman servant, a woman who is serving the woman who is giving birth. So she's really the one that's cleaning out the bedpans and doing all the dirty work. What I see her doing and what I'm doing in the birthing space is holding the container safe so that this woman can be in her full expression and feel safe to dance in the way that she needs to so that her baby can come out of her body safely. And a lot of that requires moving through so many psychological blocks and emotional blocks. And as a doula, that is our role, is to be there to help her move through those psychological blocks and those emotional blocks. Now, the woman has a choice, and the partner and the woman both have a choice to have and invite medical care professionals into the space. That would be perhaps a medical midwife or registered midwife, or they would be going to the hospital to see an obstetrician. And these healthcare professionals are the ones with the clinical skills. So if you are wanting vaginal exams, if you're wanting heart rate monitoring, if you're wanting to have your blood pressure checked and your baby under the monitor during the birthing process, then you would invite these medical care professionals in the space. The birth doula is not going to perform these clinical skills. She's not trained, and I'm choosing to not be trained in these skills. And so I hope that that paints a clear picture as to what the doula is doing versus any medical care professional in the space.
Okay, so if somebody was inclined to have a home birth and they wanted to hire and work with a doula, would that in most cases replace somebody like a midwife or an OB, or would you be in addition to a birthing team for a woman?
Right. So from my experience, like I was saying, the first 6 years of my career, I was predominantly working within the medical system, supporting families that were birthing in the hospitals. And so then I'm an addition to the process. Um, Throughout COVID, I was noticing a lot of my clients, their medical midwives were actually abandoning them through the birthing process, coercing them into transferring to the hospital in the middle of their labor, and my clients saying, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. And so now I've been left in a position where, okay, I'm here and you're birthing your baby and there's no medical care provider here. Is this even allowed? Yes, it is allowed. There are specific restricted acts that I cannot perform, right? So going back to the difference between performing clinical skills like cervical checks and checking for the baby's heart rate and that kind of stuff. These are not skills that I'm trained in or choose to be trained in. Um, so yeah, you're allowed to just have, I mean, your doula there, you can have medical care professionals there, you can just have your dog there, whatever you want, right? It's ultimately up to you and the experience that you're choosing for yourself.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of interesting how we question, like, oh, like, am I allowed to just be here? Because my grandma, my avó, she grew up in Portugal, and she will tell you stories of just people working in the farms, pregnant, pop out their baby, and then they just like keep working. And it's like kind of like funny, but not funny how we're like, oh, can I even be there to attend a birth? Or, women feel like you have to have all of these extra things when my avó, who's only 2 generations away, is like, yeah, we just popped babies out like in the middle of the fields. It's just a normal occurrence. And like the village, the community, like the people they were working with would be the ones who are there to assist them, not, medical system or checking all of these things. It's like such a natural experience. And of course, probably rates of, death and issues were higher back then than they are now. And we're blessed to have, when we need it, the ability to have these interventions. But it's just such a natural process that women innately know how to do, and our bodies know how to make a baby and also bring a baby into this world, which is really quite beautiful. So I think one thing that a lot of women have as kind of like a drawback to maybe wanting a home birth is just how many women nowadays are getting C-sections, whether that's either they're setting up an appointment to get a C-section, or it's what they call an emergency C-section, which is unfortunately becoming more and more common nowadays. And, working in the health space with women with digestive and hormonal issues, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but C-section births versus vaginal births really do have long-term health implications for the baby, even as they grow into adulthood, if they're not exposed to their mother's vaginal microbiome. And there's a lot of other implications there. But from your perspective, why would you say that C-section rates are so high in BC and continuing to climb?
Just to offer some context, right now, the World Health Organization, so the WHO, suggests that in developed countries and developing countries, which would include Canada and the United States, North America, the cesarean rate of delivery, the cesarean section within a developed country should only be about 10 to 15%. And right now in British Columbia, our cesarean section rate is roughly 43%. And it could be even higher. So the article that I'm pulling this from was conducted, and the research was conducted in 2020. And we're now in 2024. And so the cesarean section rate could easily have gone up in the lower mainland of British Columbia. So you're risking 43% chance of major abdominal surgery when you are birthing your baby within the medical system. Why is this happening? Well, from my perspective and from my experience working within the birth space, we're meddling with birth way too much. We're pulling a woman out of her body's natural, like you're saying, innate capability. We are disturbing this natural physiological process with interventions that are, you're right, designed to support and predict and prevent imminent danger to the mother and the baby. The narrative is telling us that these medical interventions are supporting and preventing, when from what I'm seeing in reality, they're just meddling with the process, disturbing the process. There's an incredible cascade of hormones that is flowing through the woman's body when she is birthing her baby, such as melatonin is there to keep her calm and relaxed through the experience. This natural output of oxytocin is flowing through her body. There's an incredible amount of relaxin moving through the muscles so that she can open up and soften in through the experience. All these wonderful endorphins, to support the intensity of birth. Yes, it is intense. Is it painful? Let's try and reframe our language around it, right? The intensity of birth is next to none, absolutely. But when we interfere with the cascade of hormones that are naturally occurring within the body, that is when complications arise. And so from my perspective, the cascade of interventions is leading to a cesarean section. So 43% chance of cesarean section if you're birthing within the medical system right now. And yes, that would include home birth with medical midwives, because they are an extension of the medical industrial complex. They are an extension of obstetrical care. They have rules and regulations that they must abide to, and licensures that they need to protect in order to remain registered care providers, right? So they are the ones that are performing these interventions. They are the ones that are conducting the standard operating procedures that are disturbing this woman's natural cascade of hormones. So if you want, Sarah, I can go into the cascade of interventions just to help kind of, just to have your listeners understand sort of why cesarean section is happening.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first intervention, I would say, is leaving your home. So the moment you come out of your natural, comfortable, cozy environment, you are subjecting yourself to perhaps the body going into more of a sympathetic nervous system state. The body needs to be in a
even for the average person, going to a hospital, not giving birth is stressful. Like, how many people do you hear who are like, I hate being in hospitals? Like, you go to visit someone and you just automatically get this like ick in your body of like, oh, like it's not a pleasant place to be. And I think about that too. And like, just how many people say that, or like the physiological response of your body stepping into something like a hospital. Our nervous system is wired to almost associate hospitals with like something's wrong, somebody is sick. And so that wiring we have really creates a physiological response, as you mentioned. So like in the context of birth, of course, that's going to impact the mother's nervous system, which of course is then going to impact the baby's nervous system as well. So even just that, I think, is really overlooked. And like for women who are maybe listening to this and deciding like, what is your response when you go into a hospital, birthing aside? Because that is also going to subconsciously be happening amidst, as you mentioned, the intensity of birth, and maybe not necessarily recognized as in the forefront because birth is probably way more intense than that subtle feeling, but it's definitely impacting the woman's experience and also the baby's nervous system at the time of birth. So I think that's like really important for women to consider just in and of itself.
You're totally right. And from what I understand, birth requires an incredible amount of surrender. And if you're in an environment where you don't feel comfortable, you think about every other mammal on the planet that goes to birth their young, they are looking for somewhere pretty dark, pretty quiet, pretty warm, undisturbed. That's where they're going to birth their young. And we're mammals. And when it comes to birth, I just want to invite people to step back into being a mammal, step back into the primitive ways of your body. And actually what happens when a woman is birthing is she's moving out of her prefrontal cortex, so her thinking mind, her logistical mind, and going into the primitive mind, the limbic mind, where she is now an animal. And so when you're in an environment that is not conducive for you to flow into your animalistic way, then it's going to be really hard for you to find surrender. You're going to be constantly thinking, and trying to protect yourself, and in this flight or fight or fawn response when we're in the hospital system, or if we're birthing with medical care providers in our home and we don't necessarily trust these care providers, or we feel as though they have an agenda for us. That can be dangerous as well. Not dangerous, well, yeah, dangerous, because then you could be subjecting yourself to the cascade of interventions, which leads to a cesarean section, right? Yeah.
Pretty funny
Yeah.
too, because if we think of this on a small scale, like how obviously I work with a lot of clients who have digestive issues, and the number of clients who say when they're in a place they don't feel comfortable, they can't poo. And like that is kind of like on a small scale, also just a release of your body. And like to see like women's digestive system, which is way less intense than birth, just seize up and we can't release or let go, even on a small scale of our bowels, which is also a natural process. That is so magnified in birth. And like the number of people we hear when I travel, I can't go poo or I'm constipated, or when I'm like at school or at work, I can't go, I can only go at home. So these are also signs on a smaller scale of like, yeah, we do know this to be true, but a lot of us are just indoctrinated into like you go to a hospital to have a birth, and we don't necessarily think about all of these other signs from our body that if we stop and reflect, we can actually feel that like our nervous system probably doesn't feel as good in that hospital environment to feel safe and release and let go. And as you mentioned, like we need to have this surrender in birth. Well, I haven't given birth yet, but I imagine that's how it's like. So I agree that that is a big intervention that's probably very overlooked, as it's so normalized to like go to the hospital to have a birth now that people probably don't really stop to even reflect about it as much as they should.
And it's only been the last, like, I think it's like 100, not like less than 100 years, where with the rise of medical obstetrics, this has become the new normal. And we have been conditioned to believe that birth is this pathological event. The woman is broken. She cannot birth her baby on her own. She needs the doctor to extract the baby, to help with the extraction of the baby. She needs the nurses in the room to support her through the process. And I've even had many reports of women telling me with their second baby, they want to birth at home because their first time birthing in the hospital, they found it to be so painful. She's like, I couldn't relax. I couldn't get into my breathing techniques, all the podcasts I listened to and the hypnobirthing tracks that I practiced. All of that just went out the window because I was in an environment that was super cold and sterile and uncomfortable. I couldn't get into my zone. I had people poking and prodding me. I had this strap wrapped around my belly. I wasn't able to move. They didn't let me eat or drink. Like, sorry, but this sounds really fucked up. Oh, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
Um, but this sounds like borderline abusive. You know what I mean? Like, not allowing her to dance freely, like I mentioned before, not allowing her to be in the space of full expression. The intensity that a woman is feeling in the birthing experience is actually helping her. However she needs to move, she's got to be embodied and listening to the pain. And I say that like this. The pain is showing up, telling her that she needs to move her body in a certain way so that the baby can move in a certain way, because they're working together to get out of the body. For the baby to get out of the body, they need to work together. Now, if she has been desensitized or has engaged so much with the cascade of interventions to the point of epidural, now she can't actually feel her body from the waist down. But what leads to the epidural, and we'll come back to this because the epidural has implications on the baby as well and its ability to be birthed. What leads to the epidural is these overwhelming sensations being felt within the body, not being able to surrender into it with her breath, or find this place of trust in the body. And that is often because she's been given a synthetic form of oxytocin. and Pitocin, right? So this intervention of Pitocin, this drug that's administered in the body to speed up the process or help the woman along, is actually, again, interfering with the natural cascade of hormones that is happening within the body in its physiological process. And when Pitocin is administered, she is not getting those natural endorphins, that melatonin. Those hormones are not actually catching up to the level of the synthetic oxytocin, which is called Pitocin. And so she's actually feeling more pain and subjecting herself to this really intense feeling in the body that nobody can humanly actually, I mean, some women do it without an epidural, but you're forced into an epidural when you're given Pitocin, in my opinion, because you're suffering. The body can't actually synthesize and metabolize this synthetic form of oxytocin.
Okay, so going to the hospital and taking out of your home is the first intervention. We kind of touched on a couple other ones, but what would be the second, in your opinion, intervention that often occurs during birth?
Right. So you leave your home, the nurse attaches this continuous fetal monitoring device to your belly. So continuous fetal monitoring is capturing an image, or essentially it's reading the heart rate of the fetus inside the womb. So it is telling the doctors and the nurses if this baby has a quote unquote healthy and normal heart rate. What happens sometimes in birth is the baby takes a rest, they relax. If she hasn't been subjected to all of this intense energy, sometimes the baby will take a relax mode. And then the heart rate monitor is picking up in what is called inactivity. And everyone's concerned that the labor is slowed down. This woman's birthing process is going to stop and stall, and the baby's going to die. Okay, so now she's not allowed to take the continuous fetal monitoring strap off of her belly because they're concerned about the baby's heart rate and they need to continue monitoring it. And keeping in mind that the nurses and the obstetricians are constantly thinking about litigation, right, at the end of the day, which is kind of sad. But they have to perform these standard operating procedures. And it's the same with medical midwives at a home birth as well. They don't have the continuous fetal monitoring strap, but they do have a Doppler that they would want to be using about every 20 minutes. And if they notice a strange heart rate from the baby, then they'll want to be doing it every 5 minutes. So they're coming in with their hand and they're meddling around with your belly and trying to find this perfect heart rate. So anyways, there could be an inactivity of the baby. So the heart rate slows down. Now there's an increased level of anxiety within the mother. There's an increased pain felt within the body because she is not given the space to just breathe and try and surrender into the experience. We have false positive monitor readings from the continuous fetal monitor or the Doppler. So many false positives. I have seen so many false positives cause this drama and this chaos within the birth space. Okay, so now the birthing process maybe slows down, which happens so that she can take a break, and everyone's, again, panicked that the labor is going to stall completely and this baby's going to die. So let's try and speed things up. So they might want to perform rupture of membranes. So they go in with this super long hook and they remove the membranes off the wall of the womb. And it causes that big gush of fluid for some women. Maybe it helps things move along. Maybe you're just causing the baby's heart rate to increase. Okay, so now we have all these.
Baby out.
Now we're stressing the baby out. We're forcing things along. We're coercing this mother into this experience that doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel good. And yeah, and we did not do any sort of trigger warning. And so I apologize if this is triggering anybody who has given birth in the hospital, um, because this is traumatizing at the end of the day. It's very traumatic. So now we have the membranes are ruptured, and it is stated then the baby has to come out of her body within the next 12 hours. Otherwise, we're doing a cesarean section because there's now an increased risk of infection. Okay. So let's get this baby out ASAP. We're going to give you Pitocin. So that's that drug I was talking about earlier, the synthetic form of oxytocin. Pitocin, like I mentioned, it doesn't give the body a break. It just hammers down on the uterus. It says contraction, 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 contraction. The brain, those beautiful endorphins, the melatonin, none of that is catching up to the speed of this synthetic form of oxytocin. And so the woman is feeling so much intensity. She cannot handle it. She is now suffering. She needs an epidural. Okay. What happens with the epidural is she can no longer feel from the waist down, which is an amazing relief. And we see it all the time online. And it's just a bunch of grooming. It's just grooming women to go ahead and get the epidural. It'll save your life kind of thing, right? If you cannot feel what's happening in your body, how are you supposed to move in certain ways to adjust to the baby's movements to support the birthing process of the baby? At that point, you are now giving your birth experience up, in my opinion. You are handing it over to the doctors now because the baby is affected by the epidural. The baby doesn't have the same amount of strength as it would have if it wasn't given an epidural. And it doesn't have the same level of oomph. So what the baby is doing during the fetal ejection reflex is they're pushing off the top of the uterus. So they're kind of, the fundus is the top of the uterus that's pushing down during the sensations of birth and squeezing the baby out. And then the baby is also pushing off the very top of your uterus to kind of get itself out of your body. The baby doesn't have the same level of strength when you have been epidural has been administered. Okay. So now there's also inactivity of the fetus because the epidural kind of slows everything down for the baby. Now, again, we're going back to the heart rate that's going off and we're concerned the baby's going to die. This birthing process is going to take too long. If you don't get this baby out in the next hour, we're going to do a cesarean section. So now the doctors come in with their forceps or all their fancy tools to extract the baby out of your body because you're just in a dissociated state. You can't even feel what's happening and what's going on. And perhaps the baby's heart rate is getting to a critical level. So they're coming in with the vacuum. It's a little suction that goes on the top of the baby's head. And they're pulling on the baby to get the baby out with hopefully the support of your sensations and your body's contractions. So anyways, we see where this is going. I think so many people know the story. And if the vacuum extraction isn't working, if your baby is stuck, then they'll go for the forceps, which they have to perform an episiotomy. So they have to cut your perineum to get the giant metal spoons inside your vagina to pull out your baby. If these, it's just crazy. Like if these don't work, then we're going in for a cesarean section. So after all of that, right, then we're going in for a cesarean section. And then of course, the final intervention would be the separation of the mother and the baby. Because this baby was in distress, they're going to cut the cord right away, bring it over to the table, maybe do fetal resuscitation, or whatever their pediatrician is checking to ensure that this child is breathing properly. And that's a whole nother conversation that we could get into just around the third stage management of birth, which is the birth of the placenta. So you can see how this story is leading to so much postpartum depression, so much postpartum anxiety, because this experience that nature has designed for us to feel into our power, feel into our instincts, feel into just so much transcendental, like the opportunity for transcendental like meditation and the amount of DMT that's like being that is being released from the pineal gland during the birthing process, right? Nature has given us this incredible rite of passage. It's totally sabotaged when you leave your home and you step into the wards of the maternity wards to birth your baby, right? It's just like, what a shame, really, what a shame. And so the cesarean section rate, yeah, right now is about 43%, and it continues to grow. And the implications of major abdominal surgery, I feel like we're going to have a bunch of women in the next 10, 20, 30 years with all of these complications, all of these challenges because of this major abdominal surgery. And that's what we're headed up against in the next, I think, decade. It's coming sooner than later.
We're already starting to see it. And I think a big thing that was kind of like underlying that's really important for women to know is how much of what you just mentioned is just standard procedure. And, I work arguably like in the medical space too. There is no standard procedure. Some people take 12 months to heal the same thing. Other people take 1 month to heal. Some people take longer to birth. Some people take shorter. And when women surrender themselves to doctors rather than the experience of birth, they're running on a doctor's timeline. And like I say this to clients all the time is your body doesn't give a fuck about a timeline. Your body is doing its thing. We can do the best to support it. But like you said, they only have X amount of time from this point of birth to that point of birth. Otherwise, it's too slow. You can only stay in the hospital for X amount of time because we got to get you out or they'll send you home. So all of these false timelines are also stressing out a lot of moms who maybe don't know any different. And they're just like, oh my gosh, something is wrong because it's not happening at the rate it's quote unquote supposed to, rather than understanding like there is no rate it's supposed to, right? Like your body's just going through this natural process. So in working with a lot of women at home births, compared to hospital settings, what would you say is like maybe what differs in time length from what a woman could expect to experience in a natural birthing process rather than run by doctors' timelines?
This is the number one question. So for a primip, so a mother who's birthing a full-term baby for the first time, I've been with families for up to about 72 hours. Okay. And I'm not saying that's the average, but let that be your expectation. And if you birth your baby in under 24 hours at home for the first time, high five, amazing. Like you really must have surrendered. You had great support. You were embodied. Your baby was in a great position. And that's incredible. But it can take about 2 or 3 days, not to mention the week or 2 weeks before where the cervix was softening and the body was preparing and the mucus plug was coming out and the lower back was starting to soften and the pelvis and the hips were opening. And like all of these processes of early labor are happening for weeks leading up to the cervix fully opening up and the baby coming down and out, right? So for a primate mother, full-term baby, I would expect about 2 days in the birthing portal before you meet your baby. Yeah.
And you mentioned that in the hospital, it's about 12 hours. They expect it to be done.
It's got to be done, as soon as possible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that also, puts a lot of stress on both the mother and the baby to like rush something that really shouldn't be rushed. And just taking out the natural ebbs and flows that occur during this process to make it, into this like squished into a timeline that's not serving the mom or the baby.
Well, and also, this is where things get really woo, and some people try to not listen to this, but there's an energy to birth that there's so much more than just the mechanics of birth and the anatomy and physiology, right? There is an energy to it. And this soul, this spirit, whatever you want to call it, that's coming earth side has a plan. And they're coming with whatever contracts, whatever karma, whatever you want to call that. And so they need the time to move through the birthing process in their way. And as the vessel and as the person with a womb and the one who's really supporting this process, you must be patient as well to listen to your baby, learn how to listen to your baby. And that's really what you're gifting yourself when you are birthing undisturbed, when you're birthing at home. You are giving yourself the opportunity to learn how to listen to your baby, listen to your body, be extremely intuitive. Who wouldn't want to gift themselves that opportunity? That is so incredibly powerful. You don't necessarily feel like you depend on anybody to take care of your child in the postpartum experience when you gift yourself that experience of physiological home birth.
And I think just going back to like the role or the importance of having a doula there is, a lot of women maybe aren't as well informed in what natural birth looks like, and obviously haven't been through the experience as many times as someone like a doula who's there to just support them in like, hey, this is actually a normal sensation. Like your baby's heart rate is slowing down because it's taking a step back. It's not problematic. And just the support of understanding the process and understanding that, as much as somebody can research or study the birthing experience, everybody's is so unique. So to have somebody who's navigated that experience so many times be there to hold space and to help them stay relaxed in the process and to also help to guide them. Like I know how valuable that is for clients who say, oh, I'm not feeling that well in a GI protocol. And I can say, yeah, it's a natural part. It's die off. You might feel worse before you feel better. Oh, okay. So it actually is working. Same thing, right? When you have somebody who's been through this experience and held space for so many women to say like, what you're experiencing is normal. It's okay. It's something to move through. Like the impact that has on the mother being able to relax in the experience is so incredibly valuable compared to somebody who's trying to rush you on a certain timeline just to hit their medical target. So I think that also can be a really great guide for women to relax into their own experiences, actually having somebody like a birth doula there who knows that this can be different for every single woman to help guide them and keep them in this state of like surrender and relaxation.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important to have people in the space that you love and you trust and who trust in physiological birth. So it's interesting because yes, there are a lot of women that are seeking home birth, but what they don't know is that registered midwives in British Columbia, anyways, the majority of the registered midwives, and I'm not trying to villainize them, but most of those care providers have not actually ever witnessed physiological birth. They only know intervention. They only understand birth as a means of pathology, which is, you can find these unicorn midwives who are willing to be there and to sit on their hands and just allow for you to freely express and be in your experience. But it does require quite a lot of advocacy from you, from your partner. Actually, I wouldn't even ask the woman to learn how to advocate for herself because she's in her primitive mind, she's in her limbic mind, she's not in her neoparental cortex when she's birthing. So it's a good idea to have your partners super well informed around physiological birth, or yes, hire a doula in the space who knows and understands physiological birth and can help that medical midwife understand that this family is really choosing to not engage with these interventions that could lead to cesarean. And there's one intervention that I didn't mention earlier, which I feel like we can talk just briefly about now, and that would be cervical checks. So having the nurse or the obstetrician or the registered midwife go inside the woman's body with their hands to feel the cervical dilation or see how dilated this woman is, to see if her birth is working. Okay. If she's having sensations, if she is holding on to the table, breathing into her body, making weird faces, trying to move her hips around, let me tell you, she's in labor. She is definitely dilating, and there's blood on the floor that shows us she is having cervical dilation. So why do we have to meddle with it? Why do you have to have your hands inside her body? You know what I mean? And it goes back to, well, it's just more convenient for them. It's so that they have something to write down on paper and say, well, at this time she was this dilated. And again, putting her on that clock, putting her into that linear framework of birth, which in my opinion should not exist, right? We should give women the space to be able to freely express and feel their own bodies. So what I encourage women in birth, especially home birth, right? Feel for your own cervix, you know? I'll often hear from a woman, she'll look at me, she's like, how much longer? I don't want to do this anymore. Like, oh, it's like, okay, well, why don't you just stick your hands inside your body and feel for your baby? See if your baby is there. And, the look on her face is like, can I even do that? Right? Yes. Like, I don't know, wash your hands, do whatever you got to do to feel comfortable with doing that. But like, if you want to know, like, you can feel for yourself, right? And then sure enough, yeah, she puts her hands inside her body and she feels her baby's head, or she feels the sac, and it's so fascinating, and she's super encouraged and she's all excited because her baby's right there. That is a moment of empowerment, a moment of that being fascinated by your body and getting excited, versus someone else doing that for you and giving you maybe some bad news, or telling you, oh, you're only 3 centimeters dilated. Like, I'm really nervous that this is going to take too long. You're going to get too exhausted. I think we should go to the hospital. You should get some Pitocin, or right. Like, and then it leads to the cascade of intervention. So yeah.
Right. So somebody wanted to hire a birth doula and they were well informed. They hired an incredible doula. They informed their partner, and maybe they wanted to have a medical midwife present in case of emergency. Is the medical midwife required by law at any point to intervene against the will of the mother and the father and the birth doula?
If she is performing acts out of coercion, medical coercion, that is something that can be reported by the family. So the family, all they have to do is say, we're declining this cervical check. We don't want you to listen to the baby's heart rate. And all this medical midwife has to do is chart that and say, patient declined. I tried, the patient declined. I tried, the patient declined. Now, if a midwife is showing those charts to the board or the College of Midwives, and they're seeing this pattern where this midwife is constantly getting declined, that's a red flag. And so she might, yeah, you see, like, this is where the politics of birth really start to get messy. But she is obliged by the college to perform these interventions. And if she's constantly getting her clients are declining, then that she could get in trouble, or she could have a talking to. But yeah, the family has every right to say no to any sort of procedure, to any sort of intervention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's important for everyone to be educated, of course, and having the right support. And you mentioned a little bit about the importance of having your partner there and well educated. So can you talk a little bit about the role of the father in the birth space, especially for home births or even hospital births too?
Yeah. Well, I have a nice relationship with my clients. I feel like I can be a sister to them in the birth space, but I can't actually offer her the level of intimacy that her partner can offer her to support her with the beautiful flow of oxytocin through her body. So that oxytocin is what we feel when we're in love, when we're experiencing orgasm, when we're experiencing even when we're sharing food with our family and our friends, we're feeling this like oxytocin in our body. The partner is the best person to offer that, right? To give her this, if they have a loving and safe relationship, right? The partner and the fathers are often the best conductors of oxytocin, is what I like to say. And just having eye contact with your partner in birth, just being able to feel held by them, feel protected and safe in that masculine energy is so healing for both parties. And yeah, this is where like there can be just transformation for couples and relationships in the birthing process, because it is so intense and it is so challenging. And when a woman is bonding Like typically what will happen is in a fawn response, in a nervous system fawn response, and Kimberly Ann Johnson talks a lot about this, but a woman in birth will often try and bond with a certain person during the birthing process to help them get through the intensity of it. And oftentimes she'll bond with the care provider who their toolkit is just filled with medical interventions and, drugs and opioids. Whereas if she's bonding with the partner, their relationship is going to transform because what tools does he have? Well, he has massage, he has loving touch, he has words of affirmation, or she can bond with her doula, right? And that does happen, and it can swap, it can move around during the birthing portal. But yeah, it's just so incredible to see when the woman is bonding with her partner. It's this sacredness that we cannot touch and we shouldn't fuck with, honestly, because that whatever is happening there is going to get the baby out of her body, guaranteed. Right. It's the same energy that brought the baby into her body. So it's the same energy that's going to get the baby out of her body. So let them do their thing, close the door, baby will come.
Right. Okay, so let's maybe talk through if let's say I get pregnant, which hopefully soon I'll get pregnant and I'll hire Madison as my doula and it'll be awesome. But let's say I get pregnant and I decide I want to have a home birth and maybe I'm in the early stages of pregnancy. Can you talk me through the process of somebody deciding they want a home birth, hiring a doula, how that looks leading up to the birth, what to expect or what they should, generally speaking, of course, everybody's different, prepare for a home birth and just kind of take you through like a client experience of yours?
I'd like to spend at least 10 hours with the family prenatally in that antenatal time. So while she's pregnant, and we're just having conversations. Like I could go into all of the interventions and what to avoid and what to look out for so that you have more informed choice. But with me, what I've done over the last 9 years is I've actually partnered up with Michelle Tiliakos and Sam Gagnon. They are the owners and operators of My Powerful Birth. So they're the ones that are providing my clients with the prenatal education, learning about the medical interventions, learning how to advocate for yourself in a medical setting if you choose to birth in that medical setting with medical care providers. And the relationship between myself and the family, that's what I want to work on during the prenatal period, developing that trust, having those hard conversations, talking about death, and normalizing really difficult conversations and subjects so that you don't feel so overwhelmed when you're in the birthing process with fear and anxiety. So mitigating fear, mitigating anxiety in the birth process through those conversations. And then just checking out your space, like seeing your faucets. Is my hose is the adapter for the hose going to work in this sink? Should we put the pool here? And like figuring out those logistics. Yeah, that's one thing I can help you with as well. Talking about prenatal nutrition, and around the importance of protein. And I'm sure you know all about that, and you're going to be enlightening many of your clients around that. And then just having conversations, preparing them for postpartum, talking about breastfeeding. Listen, the more we interfere with the birthing process, the more challenging your breastfeeding experience is going to be because you're interfering with the physiologic hormone of birth, and that will interfere with the physiologic hormones that are involved with breastfeeding. Then just being on call and answering their texts when she's having a woe, when she's having a moment of anxiety. Say she just left her appointment with the midwives feeling completely discouraged and not really sure what the hell is going on anymore and concerned. That conversation to calm her down, reduce her anxiety, let her know that they're just doing what they got to do and that you're not broken, your baby is perfectly healthy. And yeah, being on call and then being there in the portal and being fully present. And of course, the postpartum as well. So yeah, it's a lot of work actually. It's like it's a lot of work, right? because it is such a unique experience. I wish
Mm-hmm.
that I had like this, like I had this textbook that I could follow for every client, but there's so much involved with this really transformative experience. And so I need to have these conversations with them and get to know them and develop this level of trust first before we can just jump into such a sensitive and vulnerable experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what would you say? Well, just be mindful of time and have one final question, and then we'll talk about your services. What would you say from clients who've maybe previously had a hospital birth and they decide that was not for them and they want to have a home birth? Obviously, chatting with a lot of clients and their experience, what would you say is their biggest takeaways, or maybe something you would want to say to people who are listening to this and have had a hospital birth and thinking of home birth, or maybe it's their first baby and they want to have a home birth? What are three important takeaways or things that you feel from clients or yourself is really important and transformational for them to understand and know?
I think the biggest piece of advice is if you want to manifest a more natural experience or a less traumatic experience, then the moment you start having your birthing sensations, go into your bathroom, turn the light off, light a candle, close the door, and don't let anybody in, ultimately. Unless if you feel like you need a sister there, you need, the like your great, was it your great grandma? She had a couple women in the field that were supporting them, um, that was supporting her. Unless if you feel like you need that, you can prepare for that, know these women, have them on call for you, but try to be in the process, be in your sensations, breathe through your sensations for as long as you possibly can. And maybe you'll just have a baby in the bathtub and your body will do what it needs to do, what it inherently knows how to do safely. And you won't be disturbed, you won't be traumatized, and you'll have a miracle.
That's beautiful. And I think, a lot of women, especially for anything that's their first experience, it comes with a lot of anxiety, right? They want a healthy baby, they want nothing to happen. They've heard all these traumatizing stories from their friends and families, and everybody has their 2 cents to give about what you should and shouldn't do and what their experience was like. And I think it's also important to know that, when we're moving into a new experience, it does require a level of trust in our body and in ourselves and in the people we've chosen to be involved in this experience. And that just because we feel anxious or nervous about something doesn't mean it's the wrong choice. And a lot of this like anxiety and unknown and discomfort just comes from a new experience. And this is arguably like one of the most powerful experience we'll ever go through as a woman is becoming a mother. Like, holy smokes. Of course, that's something that, many women want to have all their ducks in a row. Well, if this happens, I want to make sure da da da. And it really takes us out of the ability to just trust and realize that, yeah, discomfort and anxiety don't mean it's the wrong choice. It doesn't mean it's going to be wrong. It's a natural response for our body for something new and so monumental in our lives. And so I know to like put a lot of women's minds at ease, if they do require home birth and they're working with educated doulas, there probably are certain instances where even a birth doula might say, hey, this is a time for something like medical intervention, right? It's not like you're stuck in this experience and maybe something actually does start to become a little bit dangerous. Your birth doula, if you hire good ones, is educated to also know what's within her scope of practice and to be able to assist you, and is not anti-intervention, but intervention when necessary. So I think that's also important for women to know and understand, is that, there are certain times where it may be required, and hiring a birth doula doesn't mean that they're gonna, put you or your baby at risk just for the sake of a home birth.
Yes, great point. And thank you so much for saying that, Sarah, because it's so true. We are here to offer education and to help normalize physiological birth, but in no way do I feel like it is safe to coerce a woman into staying at home. If she's looking me in the eyes and telling me something is wrong, I really don't feel good, I don't feel safe, this hurts way too much, then we have to go. Then let's go. Then the hospital is what, 10 minutes away, 20 minutes away? Let's just get there, have them check it all out. They have the tools. This is where we have reverence for obstetrical care, where we have reverence for intervention. And hey, and if everything is fine, then whatever psychological block we just moved through, we can go back home if you want. You know what I mean? But there's just, the options are absolutely endless. But I hear you. Definitely do not get caught up on one story. Let things flow. That is the feminine. We flux and we flow.
Beautiful. So where can people find you? And I know we talked about doula being one of your services, which is incredible, but I know you also have many other offerings. So if you just want to let people know where they can find you, what kind of services you offer, and about your super exciting launch, which is coming up, which I will definitely be taking part of to prepare myself for birth too.
Yay. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. So in May 2024, I'm launching the Dream Birth online program. And this has been in gestation for like the last 18 months. And I've just been so excited. I'm so excited to finally launch it and have a beta round of participants that are willing to help me learn and grow as well as an educator. And this is for women and families who are wanting to manifest as physiological home birth, to go through their fears, go through their anxieties, choose their whether or not they, or help them understand whether or not they want medical care providers in the space, or if they feel confident and safe in just doing it at home with themselves as a family. It's going to be launching in May 2024. I'm really excited. In the meantime, people can go to my website. I have meditations for you to download. You can follow me on Instagram at Ode to Birth and just listen to my rant and read my read my posts and gather some of this really incredible energy. And then for those of us who are wanting to explore womb healing and step into the realms of womb consciousness where so much medicine can be found, I have partnered up with two other incredible womb healers in the city, and we have launched the Red Tent Mystery School. We're in the midst of our program right now, but we have many more programs that we'll be launching in the forever. And then we have in-person events in the Red Tent, which is just powerful rite of passage ceremonies and initiations for women to really step into their power and their full expression. And what else is there?
They can hire you as a birth doula.
Or they can hire me. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I've have lots of support now in this work, which is great because I was doing this little me all on my own for a long time and it got really exhausting. So I have an amazing team supporting me and supporting my clients as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm always open for inquiries and to get to know you. And right now I'm choosing families that are, again, trying to manifest that physiological home birth. And I'm just looking forward to meeting more people that are willing to step into their sovereignty and birth their children in a sovereign way. And those are the clients that I really want to work with. And it just lights me up. And it's so much of my dharma to be here for these people and for these women.
And it's such important work, just educating women even on their choices, because a lot of the way that females operate in society is lack of awareness around our bodies that creates a lot of fear and anxiety and unknown. And we believe certain things are just true, like, oh, you have a baby in the hospital. That's what many people know. And it's so beautiful that I feel like society's kind of taking a turn to go back to what's natural and what's innate in our trusting our body's wisdom. And it's so nice to have people who are able to educate and guide and put women at ease in this natural experience. And I believe that despite whatever the medical system wants to push, more and more women are going to just step back into this knowing and this education. And the more that women have this sense of bravery to go through these experiences, the more it inspires other women that it's possible for them too. And so it's really important work that people like you are out here helping to educate. And I'm sure a lot of people listen to this and just feel sense of like release and kind of an exhale breath around birth, which can be like a very anxiety inducing experience for so many.
We are deprogramming, we are unlearning, and it's a big process. And you're right, it's scary, but I commend all the women. Like, I really just bow down to all my clients for stepping into this, the unknown, and trusting in the mystery of birth and trusting in the process as it is inherently safe. And surely there are anomaly situations, but it's too bad that these anomaly situations have really set the precedent for all women and for all families. So we are changing the game, and it's the dawn of a new era. It is a new time, and timelines are shifting. I'm really excited about it. And yeah, just thank you, Sarah, for the work that you're doing in helping women find the truth of their body and getting to the root cause of their issues, instead of band-aiding things and perpetuating this really unhealthy narrative for females. So yeah, we're doing such good work.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we're amidst this part or this like era of big shifts in like so many different areas. And I feel like a big part of that is like women coming back to themselves and their innate wisdom. And like you said, like deprogramming a lot of things that we've been taught to believe, because we just reached the turning point where it's like, why are women so sick and so unhealthy? And why are we having these traumatic experiences of bringing children into these world? And all of these things our bodies are designed to do, have menstrual cycles, have birth. Like, why is there so many pathologies around this? And it's continuing to rise. And I think it's just really kind of forcing women into looking for other answers and not accepting like this is just the way it is. Take a pill, go to the hospital for this. And it's really I think a beautiful time for women to learn and to educate and to be part of this change that's happening and hopefully going to impact younger generations to be healthy.
Oh yeah, this is for our daughters. And I know you see it
Yeah.
too, Sarah. I know you see the look on women's face when they get to discover something about themselves that is just when they get to unlock the mystery of the feminine and tune into their cycle and live in a cyclical way and trust in their body's rhythms. Like, that is magic. And once you see it when a woman has access to that, she's absolutely unstoppable. And I see a world where more women are living in this way and feel powerful and feel intuitive. And um, it's so exciting. Yeah.
It is. Well, we are so happy that you came on the podcast. We'll probably have to get you on again because there's so many things we didn't get to discuss here. If you haven't listened to the previous episode we did on releasing pregnancies and miscarriages, it was one of our most impactful episodes. I had so many messages from women who have listened to it and even hired Madison through their experience of miscarriage, which is so common, and have just been blown away by the support and how impactful it was. So I will link it in the show notes. Should definitely go back and give it a listen. And thank you so much, Madison, for your time today.